distinguished guests and participants, Kuzusang Pola. It's so fitting that we have the first panel on education, because I personally believe that there's nothing more important than education impacting all four domains of cross-national happiness, all four pillars of cross-national happiness and 9 domains of GNH. So it's so pertinent. We spent almost 15 to 20 years of our most impressionable phase of our life going through education. So it's really important for us to discuss this. And we have such a wonderful august panel of doyens on education. So may I now call our panelists to the stage, going ladies first. We have Gitanjali Wangmo, who has just come here, and I think she's already been introduced a bit. But very impressed by how you are not only an educator, but both into traditional dancing and ballet, plus a black belt karate practitioners. So please come to the stage. Then we have Sonam Wangchuk, whose work I have been following for many years now. You again heard some introduction of this remarkable son of the Himalayas, or Hindu Kush Himalayas. I think he has been introduced for his work for SECMOL, but I also follow him for his activism for statehood and constitutional safeguarding of the Union Territory of Ladakh. Then we have Dashu Arun Kapoor. Dashu Arun Kapoor is an esteemed educator with many decades of experience, graduating from St. Stephen's College. He has been the founding headmaster of Vasant Valley School, New Delhi. He is currently the head of True Gelpus Institute here, where we are. He's also on the board of Gelfu Mindfulness City, Bharti Foundation, Shinda Education Society, and many others. He's founder and chairman of Ritinjali, and also he leads the Palavan chain of preschools. He chairs Center for Escalation of Peace, author of many books, and his focus on the 5 areas of development has been recognized by 100. It's a Finland recognition as one of the 100 most inspiring educational innovations for 5 consecutive years. And Dashu Arun Kapoor has just last winter been honored with the Druk Thukse Award and Nikem, the Red Scarf status by His Majesty, the 5th King Jimmy Khesar Namgyal Wangchuk. Then we have our 4th panelist, Dr. Dorji Tinle, a lifelong educator. He has been the director of, or the president of both Samtsi College of Education and Paro College of Education. He has been a director for research and external relations. He has numerous publications to his credit, and he is also leading the Bhutan Journal of Research and Development. So we have this very impressive panel of fantastic educators. Maybe I'll move to the chair. Thank you. So welcome, panelists. What a great honor to talk to such doyens of education. I'm not an expert on education, but I'm an education enthusiast, leading an educational charity here. And my first academic publication happens to be on education, called 2 Ways of Learning. And my conclusion in that article was our modern education system is out of place, and our traditional education system was out of time. I have been acutely aware of the inadequacies of our current mainstream education systems. And there has been a lot of thought being given to address that. You have been leading wonderful initiatives on the other side of the Hindu Kush Himalayas. And I must mention again that Ladakh and Bhutan has this very strong historical ties. So I'm particularly pleased that 2 of you are here to share your wisdom with us. Now, we've been given this topic to transform education, and there are 5 major topics that I've been asked to address innovation to fix the system that's not working right now, a kind of inclusion to include not only different capabilities, but also remote and underserved communities. Then there's, they talk about how to scale that up, how to make it sustainable through creating a good ecosystem, and then finally to do share knowledge across cultures. I thought to cover all these 5, but then to make it more pragmatic for myself, because I'm a student of the Buddha and I always follow the Buddha. The Buddha's first sermon, he talked about problem solving. So I today boldly claim Buddha was the first management guru, and he was definitely an educator, because I see Buddhism as a program of education. His first teaching on 4 Noble Truths was really about problems, causes of problems, solution to the problems, and path leading to the solution. And then he said, we must identify the problems, eliminate the causes of the problems, seek the solution, and follow the path to the solution. So to begin this conversation, I thought we would first go around asking you what you see as the top 1 or 2 problems in the mainstream education system world over, and particularly in our own area. And, well, maybe we'll start with Keith and Anjali here. So we'll first deal with the problems, and then I think we talk about the solution and what we need to do as concrete actions to reach some kind of solution.
Because I've just finished.
Okay, so let's start from the other end then. Dr. Dojuangshu, what do you see as say 2 pressing problems in the current system? Because you have such deep knowledge of the mainstream education system in the country.
Thank you, La. First of all, I express my deepest respect to Tarayana under the royal patronage and sagacious leadership of Her Majesty, the Queen Mother. By the way, my college, Para College of Education, we train teachers to be primary school teachers, has a number of clubs, and the largest club is the Tarayana Club. We have a little over 500 Bachelor of Education students, and the number of students who have enrolled in the Tarayana Club is over 270. That's more than 50% of the undergraduate student population. And they are doing amazing work, going out in the communities, identifying problems, doing a lot of amazing voluntary work, working with monastic institutions, far-flung monastic institutions, laying out footpaths, mobilizing resources for monks and nuns in monasteries, nunneries that have no access to, a lot of resources. So amazing work. So it inspires me all the time.
Yes, please stop.
Yes, back to the question, what problem do I see? I think we are distancing our children farther and farther away from their roots. I think this needs to be addressed. And this is caused basically by the lack of clarity. I think we need to establish this sense of clarity, who we are, what have we inherited, what are our roots, what are the cultural, historical circumstances under which we work, and how do we strengthen these? Whether it's AI, technology, it's good. We need to embrace it. It's indispensable. We have to embrace, we have to adopt AI, we have to embrace it, but at the same time, what defines us as a people, as a society, as a culture, I think this has to be reinforced again and again and again and again. If the balance is lost, I think we will become trapped within the invincible forces of what we often call modernization and a technologically driven world. Yes. I'm often reminded of this beautiful quote by the 11th century Himalayan yogi popularly known as Milarepa, 11th century Himalayan yogi Milarepa, who practiced his entire life in the high mountain ecosystem and got enlightened. Digpi, Digpi lenam, pangbes de, Digpi lenam pangbes de Dewa is well-being, happiness. Dewa also comes from a sense of clarity and wisdom. Digpi lenam pangbes de.
So, thank you, Doctor. What I get from you is one of the biggest problems we face is of children being taken out of their local context. And this is also the theme for
Absolutely.
this discussion. Dasha Arun, you're running a boarding school here. How do you reconcile this tension between getting children out of their local context and then at the same time giving a very effective education? Can you share how is this problem of taking children, especially with we know about the central school programs. So is that a problem or is there a way we can do this effectively?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me here and thank you for Tariana to include me in being a fan of what they have been doing in Ladakh for many, many years. And he too, everybody we know, the teachers come from his institute. So having said, I just want to put, like you had said, what are the issues? Over the years, what has happened is that schooling and education have been kind of converted into one. They both be used interchangeably. Schooling is very different. It's become an end in itself, while education is completely different. Education, if you use the word, you go back to the history of the word education, it means to educate, to bring out from you the best that there is, if you even go back to the Greek word. So that is what we must, first of all, make a very definite distinction between schooling and education. What's happened is that all over the world, we have become an over-schooled and undereducated society. So that is the first problem that we need to look at, that education needs to completely be what we are all about. So that's number one. So if we look at what you said, that if you taking the children out of context, that I think is very important, that this, whatever we do has to be contextualized to the child, to the area, to the region, and through the Bhutan Baccalaureate that we have been working over here. That's number one. Contextualization is very, very crucial. And therefore, when we look at what is it that we are trying to do here, is to try to help our children grow up, first of all, from childhood to adulthood. That's the basic stuff. From child to adult, that whole process of growing up is what we are addressing. And as we know, each child is different. In the same hole, same parents, 3 children, all 3 have different likes, dislikes, aspirations. So even within a home, in the village, we still need to contextualize to the child. But the important thing is that the child withdrawn from the community is not such a great aspect. So whatever we do, we have to make sure that the community and the child are connected, even if they're not like in a boarding school, right? We have to bring the community to the school. So one of the things that we do here is that every time a child goes home and they come back to the school, they're supposed to bring back 7 gifts for us. So when they come back, they bring a story, a recipe, a song, some dance. So 7 things they bring back. Those are collected and made into books. Those are our textbooks. So each child here, when they're listening or looking at a textbook, it is written by her classmate. And therefore we bring all of Bhutan here, but we can't go to all of Bhutan. So those kind of, there are many such things that we need to do. So very clearly, we want to create a space where each child grows up to be a constructive, contributory citizen of a just and harmonious society. These are words of His Majesty. So that is it. That is what we are trying to do. Reality is such that even wherever you are, even being in a village, you can be cut out from your culture if you're being schooled. And even in a place like this, you culture can surround you if education is what it's all about. So that's my kind of.
Thank you, Dashwa. This is very beautiful. I hope you will share later on what is your favorite thing that a child brought back from their village to the school. But on your last point, you noted how localization is not about just geographic location, right? That a child may be in a remote village but living a totally global life through smartphones today. And especially when it comes to language, we have been having great struggle here in Bhutan with local languages. So Sonamla, what is the situation in Ladakh in terms of local context, especially with regard to language of education? And how serious is this problem of globalization seeping through computers and mobile phones, that a child may be based in Ladakh but actually growing up totally out of Ladakh?
There are many micro-level issues, mother tongue and so on, but as you were asking about the problem with the education system, I was more looking at macro level because there's an international audience, so too much of Ladakh may not work, but I was thinking of sharing how I see that today the world is falling apart. You know, the biggest challenge ever is climate change, and all that we have done in the last 250, 300 years is causing this, human activities. And you can find its roots in schools. Schools are designed for industrial revolution times, when people thought that nature can be exploited, conquered, consuming and production is the goal of a child when they grow to become citizens. And therefore, what I see the problem in education, apart from micro level in different places, globally, is that we are still continuing with something that was addressing 1700s, you know, when we had too little to eat, too little to clothe, too little to house. And now we have overdone. People are dying more because of overeating than out of malnourishment in most parts of the world. So if we keep giving the same fuel, we'll get the same outcome. And therefore, education needs to be changed. Today, our education seems to train children to become, multinational tycoons. I don't understand why they have to. That's where happiness comes. And the answer, again, comes from the East, from India, from Bhutan. 2,500 years ago, this is what Buddha said. And I think this is what needs to be taught in every school today. Buddha said that for a human being, it's a greater achievement to conquer a single desire than to fulfill 1,000 desires. Our schools are training everyone to fulfill 1,000 and 1,001st and 1,002nd and be the leader in fulfilling desires. And it never ends. That's the thing with desires. Whereas if it was educating people to conquer desires, reduce desires, then we wouldn't have any of the problems that we see today. So we need to think about addressing through education not each activity that pollutes or emits, but actually the root lies in how we are groomed to want more and more and more and be less and less and less happy. And therefore, that I see as the biggest challenge in education, apart from local, differences.
Thank you. Thank you. So a very global challenge, a global problem driven by capitalist, consumerist mindset. India, I suppose, would be in this same rat race for more production, more consumption. But if you can sort of narrow down a bit on specific challenges, like what you face immediately in your own circle, Gitanjali.
Yeah. So, to me, there are several problems. But the one that I would like to raise here, both for India and also what Bhutan is currently facing, is education is seen as a tool to jettison your place and move. If you're from a village in India, you want to go to the town. from the town to the city, from the city to the capital, India, and then from Delhi to New York. And this is something which is also happening in Bhutan now, people moving more and more to Australia. The biggest problem is education not making you own where you belong, you know. So there's no belonging, there's no pride of where you are born. And spiritually, it is not a coincidence that we are born somewhere. There's a purpose. And to find that purpose, and that's where I think I would like to share the example of Ladakh. When I work with youngsters there, and in university we tell people that if you, after finishing your fellowships, go to Dubai or London, you are for us failures. You are not on the, for us trump cards that will tell the world that this university has sent people. You are failures. And if you go back to your village and do something for it, and make it better, then you are our stars. And that's something I see in Ladakhis, and I don't know why it is there. I'm still trying to figure it out. They want to come back to Ladakh, even after they've done their education outside. That love for the land. And it is not being parochial. Globalization is not everybody eating the same hamburger. Globalization is an infinite buffet where every culture brings its best to the table. And that, where we are born, we have to get the best, and teach our kids to take that best forward. But somehow this whole modernization and globalization rat race, is kind of brainwashing kids to jettison their cultural identities. Nationalism is a bad word just because it does not suit UK, because it has Scotland and Ireland, forcibly taken into the great United Kingdom. So that does not make nationalism bad. But and then brings to the second problem that we don't have liberal arts education. India was the place which came up with 64 kalas, which inspired the liberal arts education of the West. But today, liberal arts education in India and also in the West is missing, where people are not able to think and know where the truth is. So the whole media brainwash, the whole narrative brainwash, and all of this. So understanding your culture deeply without becoming parochial or fanatic, and by understanding your culture, understanding the rest of the cultures beautifully, is where we should train our kids to be. That's what is missing.
Thank you. I think just like what you shared about Ladakh, young Bhutanese here also have, at the moment, a very sense of belonging to the land, to their origins, which is a very positive thing. But then, now going back to the problems, I mean, one of the challenges that we all face, I think, especially when you talk about education being delivered according to the needs of diverse groups of people, it's resource constraints. What a small country like Bhutan or a small territory like Ladakh would have in terms of resources to help provide that ideal education. So let's try to define what would be an ideal education scenario. Maybe I'll go back again to Dr. Dorji. What do you sort of imagine to be a fantastic, ideal education school system, for instance, that we should envision? And then
I think the effort, if you look at the National Education Policy 2024, and also the other policies and programmatic documents that come out of the Ministry of Education, there's always this fine balancing of what a child needs to be able to survive in a highly complex, competitive, technology-ridden world. At the same time, be deeply rooted in the heritage and the, as Sonamji rightly said, 2,500-year-old spiritual tradition and values. That balance, that effort is always there at the policy level. And these are also being implemented at the school level. We run a beautiful early childcare center in my college, ECCT Center. It's called the Rinpung ECCT Center. There's a lot of contextualization happening there. So we don't import a theoretical model, let's say, proposed by Jean Piaget, chronologically ordered development model, and impose it on the child. So the 3-year-olds, the 4-year-olds, and the 5-year-olds are out there in the space interacting with the environment, and they're asking 105 questions. Who built the Zong? Because the Rinpung Zong, the center is just below the Rinpung Zong. Who built the cantilevered bridge over there? And we take the kids there and then design projects based on the questions that they ask. We also take the little kids up to the Zong and then asking very interesting questions. Who built the Zong? It's so big. And one of the kids says, oh, this is my mom's office. And the other kid says, oh, your mom's office is so big. Who built it? Why did he build it? So based on these questions that the kids ask, the teachers are able to conceive project possibilities. In fact, we had the kids work on a fascinating Zong project, a fascinating cantilever project, a fascinating traditional house project, age 3, age 4, age 5. So I think, as Dasho Arun rightly said, contextualizing education is going to help make our children culturally intelligent, while they also are equipped with the tools and techniques that they would need to navigate their lives in a highly competitive society. So I guess it's a balancing act that we need to be constantly, be conscientious about and integrating within the education system. And the good news is the efforts are on.
Yeah. So, Dasho, you are leading, of course, a very innovative, very cutting-edge educational system here through the Royal Academy. It is as good, it's probably the best in the country at the moment. But what do you see can be done better? If you can visualize something even better.
Well, first of all, just on the word, what is the ideal school system? I don't think there ever will be one. Let's also not try and go towards something, because it's always an evolutionary process, like what you're saying. What's next? What's next? Because even in the process of growing up, what is good for a 3-year-old kid is not necessarily good for the same 8-year-old kid, right? And it has to be contextualized to the child. But in our understanding that the child devoid of her community is incomplete thing. So when you do talk in terms of child-centric, right? That is the problem also. We need to make sure, because the children who in large parts of the world where child is at the center of everything, they grow up to be very, very self-centered, right? And therefore, the idea of education, one of the big things about education, not schooling, is what do you do to make sure that everybody that you're part of is also going up, to raising all the boats that go up with you. So we go back to looking at another, in Guru Padmasambhava. We find our philosophical underpinnings come from his way, not because the teachings were the same, but the way he took it across is a very clear understanding that their treasure, that everybody has treasure. But some people are able to identify and acknowledge their treasure. Some people, like he said, he hid the treasure, saying that therefore a treasure revealer would come later to reveal when the community was ready to. So we take that same thing into a child, that some children they can become their own treasure revealers at a later date. So when that's our way of helping the child becoming her own, first of all, become a treasure seeker, and then become also a treasure revealer. And that is different where you are. So when you're an adult, and if you want to go to Australia, what's wrong with that, if that's where you want to go? But then you become a constructive, contributory citizen of a just and harmonious society. So that is evolution. If you want to say what's next, in fact, we are in the middle of discussing this. We are talking in terms of how to learn, right? Rather than what to learn. That becomes the most important thing, learning how to learn. At the moment, we are working on the quantumness of learning. That's something we should be talking about. How you bring it down to the granular, but the role of the observer is very important. And the observer are two people. One is yourself as the observer, and one is an external observer. And therefore, in this becomes assessment. Assessment not just for marks and grades, but to figure out where you are on your own journey of learning. So creating your own journey, your own roadmaps, putting down your own indicators of success, ownership of where you're going, together with adults who help you make your roadmaps. And the whole process of education is going to, as society evolves, is going to also help create the new solutions, the new ways forward. So we are very clear that our education system is an evolutionary system. The way we started 10 years ago, I hope we are not the same still today, because things have changed completely, and if we are stuck in the past, then we are not really moving. So we have to also answer that question: does education change society, or does society change education? So this yin and yang thing is what we are always constantly looking forward to, and we have to be part of the change to be the change.
Yeah, thank you. That's really good. I think it's so important to capture this message that any educational system today has to be dynamic. Now, Sonamla, you brought up this issue of how we are still stuck with this old system that was once started by the Industrial Revolution and so forth. And we still have this school system, and as Dr. Arun made the distinction between schooling and education. I particularly like this distinction because we have so many very well-educated, illiterate masons, architects, farmers, animal husbandrymen, priests, and weavers, and so forth, but not necessarily schooled. Sadly, some of these people can't even stand for elections because they haven't got a graduate degree. So we are still stuck in this mainstream sort of Eurocentric education model. Is the school system, the schooling system, any more relevant? Should we just leave our children with the parents on the farms or in the monasteries with the weavers? Should we have even a school? You have a school in Ladakh. So is that sort of archaic school system relevant? Is that the future we should envision? No.
Hello.
It's working.
Made it work. Okay. So schools could be a great place for, learning from each other, and if it's updated to the current needs of the world. Of course, it should start with a loving environment where, as I said, head, hands, and heart, where you have enough opportunities for the head to develop, and then hands, which means a lot of responsibility that the child gets, and to take care of others, to know others, to respect others, and all that is fine. Where it's lacking is, again, the heart and soul part, That, because in evolution, we have invented a great system called schools where you can orchestrate what happens in human evolution. But if we are stuck to what was done earlier, 1700s, 1800s, which was very much guided by human evolution till then, because we had come out of scarcities. We have always been in eras of scarcities where food was not enough, clothing was not enough. So we schooled our children to solve that, and we did that, and now we are overdoing it to the extent that the same solutions are going to kill us. And therefore, I think we need to relook and make it something that addresses today's problems. I think when I was quoting Buddha, I think he was too ahead of his times, to say, conquer your desires, dissolve your desires, when people didn't have enough to eat or clothe back then. Today is the best time for enlightenment, when with technology and knowledge, you have so much. But if we keep the same mentality of more and more and more, with all the robots and AI put to use, this is the best time to go less and less and less. These things can create the food and clothing. I can, go inwards towards happiness. And that's what could be the answer.
So, is schools the best place to give such kind of heart and head-related spiritual education, or you think ashrams may be a better place? How do we bring this ideal scenario of
Yeah.
3 H's into the current
So
system?
to me, an ideal school has to reflect life. And it has to be just an occasion where children are reminded that education is anyway lifelong and anytime, any place, and any pace. So as educators, children have to be empowered to learn all through the day, and even when they're sleeping, to make their sleeps conscious. And schools are just an occasion where they're reminded about it even more, and places of joy and progress, and a lot of ownership and agency where they are made to become the future leaders. And so it has to reflect life. So not sanitized places and air-conditioned rooms and things doled out to them on platters as they have become. But if it is, let's say, a school like Sekmol, which is for failure students in Ladakh, it reflects their own village, the way the school is constructed. So space design gives it's a lot of very important. There has to be a natural, seamless connection with nature, and it has to be a lot of life and live projects. Only 30% has to be in the classroom, 70% has to be in life. So to me, an ideal school is one that is just an occasion for the educator and children to remind themselves that life is, the whole of life is education, And this is here, you just come to dip into that atmosphere, to reignite that passion that it is to be lifelong and all day, any place. Yeah.
Thank you. Sharaf, is that am I supposed to open for questions from the audience or not? I could do that. Yes. But I would like to have a last round with you. If you can think of some specific, concrete, practical examples that you can share with the rest of the audience here and also beyond, that they can take home with regard to building a better education system. Libby, you had your hand up. Please be very brief with your questions.
Thank you. My question is very brief. You know that millions of people are there in Buddhist monastery, in what call that, madrasa, in Gurukul, likewise religious monasteries. So sometimes these people do not take your tools 100%. So then the education we have here, I think I cannot just sit down and leave out that advantages of the students of these monasteries. I want you refer to Buddha, you refer to Guru Rinpoche Samba, you refer to Jizmela. For a while I thought that our system is best because we produce this type of people. And again, when I come back to the 21st century, are we really good or do we need changes? Now I just want your advice. What are the things that we need changes to bring our kids to bring a better result in our form or in the world? Thank you.
Suppose anyone can take this. It's a general question, no? Anyone can take it. Okay. So Sonamla.
Thank you very much. Yes, you aptly reminded that there are many religious schools and there are many worldly schools. I think these have become kind of extremes. The religious schools are stuck in the rituals and the words of the times rather than the spirit. And I see, and the worldly schools are too worldly. They are just about free race to fulfill it. Yes, 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 yes. So I feel that, like Buddha again said, the middle path is the best path. Yeah? So a middle path where monastic schools adapt to the current world and adapt their messages and change the world, and the rest of the schools also come down from what they are. So a good mix, and it's a great occasion to practice, but again, mingling with the world and bringing it out to the world is equally important. It's like, mathematics, you have average. If you put your head in the oven and feet in the deep freezer, you will be perfectly fine in average temperature. So you have to get this and this to a good harmonious blend where the world works.
I would just like to add that be it monastic systems or be it the ordinary system, the factor that was the most important when we say Gurukul was the Guru. And we've come back full circle in the face of AI. When you have all the information and everything, then what is the role of the teacher? So the teacher ceases to be somebody who teaches by instruction or by influence, but one who teaches by example. So that's where AI is pointing us. That's where bringing together monasteries and normal life is bringing us, is that the teacher will become pivotal, and the teacher has to become that person who leads by example. It is not just enough to give, advice from the head. So true teachers of tomorrow will be living the very things they are preaching, both in the monasteries as well as in normal schools. So that's the leveler. We are, at least I cannot comment on it. I have not studied the monastic systems.
Maybe I'll
One
add a bit.
thing I have been advocating for in Ladakh is that the monastic system with monks and nuns is great, but everybody should have an experience in it. So I've been advocating that those who choose lifelong, and in Ladakh, I don't know about Bhutan, little children are sent to monastery before they know what they want to do. I have a little problem with that. I would rather see the monasteries full of everybody spending at least 1 year there and coming out with a great blend of real world and spirituality. So I would like them to exist, but fully connected with the world rather than completely cut off a few and the rest are, rampant.
Yeah, having been through both the monastic education and modern education, maybe I'll add a bit to this. I think there is a lot of work to be done in terms of reappropriating the original values and practices and adapting to the current context. I think three of you coming from India is very inspiring for me. I spent nearly 12 hours of my day these days reading ancient Indian books, mainly Buddhist books. And Vipassana is one good example. The Goenka's Vipassana is one good example of how it is taken out of an old monastic context and made so effective for broader audience. So something along those lines we may have to think. Please.
I have some interaction with Choten Nebu in Punakha and Ugen Guru here. And I think there's a lot for us to learn from the monastic system also. It's not all bad. The whole point of question and answer, I think that's a very crucial thing that needs to come into the main stream, if you want to call it that. Because the monastic learning is also mainstream for the monastic order. So when we look at that, I think there is symbiotic relationship must exist between the two. And when I go and spend some time with the young monks at Choten Nebu, there is so much to learn from there. what I see and what I've heard from here also, very often, when some of the young monks come out of the monastic system, quite a few of them do that, they have a lot to give. And actually I'm looking for people who have been through the monastic order to come here and become teachers, because I think we have a lot to learn from there. So the exclusivity is there, but I think there is also a compatibility that exists and should be encouraged. I just feel that.
Lasso. I think the beautiful thing about the Buddha's teachings is it's so spacious, it's so flexible. That's the essence. But at times, if you're not careful, the spiritual, cultural superstructures, the colors around, can seem a little intimidating. And if you don't address this in time, we could be distancing ourselves from one another. At the Paro College of Education, we signed number of MOUs with monastic institutions. We interacted with the Khembos and the Lams and the Tubus constantly. We teach them AI. We take technology into the monasteries. We ask the Khembos to come and teach our students and our faculty members basic shamatha meditation, which has turned out to be fantastic. We also teach them English, by the way. So I think constant interaction is the solution. Otherwise, there could be distance.
I would like to go a step further than both Mr. Dashu Kapoorji and yourself. I think we are past that stage where there has to be symbiotic relationship outside. I think we are today in a state where the Kurukshetra, the conflict is within. And within each of us, this matter and spirit has to be combined. The future does not see monasteries and normal individuals as existing separately. I think every normal person has to imbibe that spiritual element. And the matter and spirit, what we have traditionally kept apart, you know, as the householder and the monk and all, the time is passé. We all are in an evolutionary stage where we have to combine it in our hearts. And we have to become, as Plato says, philosopher kings, or in India we say Raj Rishi.
Can we now go around with this final round of sharing one or two tips within, say, 20 seconds, please? Sorry. Doctor, you want to start? Anything you want to share with the audience here and beyond? The specific example. I'm so sorry. Time is almost up. Okay. Then we'll probably forfeit the. Are you sure? I think we should. Oh yeah, no, I think we will wrap up the session. I don't want to run
If I
beyond
might
time.
please ask my question. I've been standing for a while now.
Oh,
please.
so sorry, I didn't see you. Okay, can you please be very brief?
Yes, thank you. I'm Ben Siring and I'm a lawyer. I think there was a very visceral reaction from me from my head, let's say, when Gitanjali made the point about London and Dubai. And sort of then the heart, you know, with all the unlearning one has to do, I wanted to ask this question because, you know, by all, I don't know, measures, from the Western standard, I'm seen as a success. And yet, I think the visceral part came from seeing how far away from tradition, you know, I have gone, right? And so, the question I want to pose, and let me direct this at Dashu Arun and Sonam. How does one resist the allure and bells and whistles of Western education? And part two of this question is, whose role is it to facilitate or encourage this paradigm shift in returning to our traditional values, which has in fact helped us to survive and thrive for centuries? But we've of course forgotten that with modern education, right? And so, yeah, to sort of summarize that question is, how do you resist it, and whose role is it to facilitate that?
Les, thank you. So, Rasharan, if you can be brief.
I'm happy you asked that, because I think what we're trying to do is to help each child grow up to be an adult. And having become an adult, become a constructive, contributory citizen of a just and harmonious society. And that society doesn't mean it's only Bhutan. We're saying wherever you go, whether it's in Dubai or London or New York or wherever you go, you should be a constructive contributory citizen of the society that you have chosen to be. So there is nothing that should hold you back from becoming what you want to be. If you are going to be saying that you go look inside, then look inside and see what you find and become a constructive contributory citizen. So I completely agree with you that should be nothing holding you back, because the world today is so much more connected. But at the same time, wherever you are, if you carry your roots with you, they will just help you flourish more. So that's my response to you is, hey, go to London, right? And sometimes bring back what are the good stuff. There is good stuff in London. Bring it back if you're going to come back. And when you're saying who's going to facilitate, help you go there or help you come back, it's you, right? If you reach out for help, there's so many people who will help you to go to London, and there will be equally larger number of people who will help you to come back to find meaningful work to do here. But if you plan to stay on in London, great.
Thank you.
So much to learn.
Thank you. Sonamla, you want to give a brief response?
Change is continuous. Fads, fashions come and go as we see, but over long term also. So as I said, we've come out of an era of scarcity in human evolution. So we are seeking more and more and more. And that also will be over on its own also, but it may take centuries, which we don't have as the world is collapsing. And therefore it needs to be facilitated. Even social media will fade away. There'll be a time when people have had enough. Even money, there will be a time when people have had enough and less is more fashionable. People will follow those who can live with so little, not billions and billions of resources and money it takes. Today they are our idols, but tomorrow it will change. But because we don't have time, you're right, we have to facilitate. And schools are a great place. Schools are a great place, great invention, which speeds that up. And therefore, schools and gurus should have been there, seen that themselves, and understood it. You can't teach it from textbooks, from a syllabus. Therefore, like Gitanjali said, gurus have to be the center of, imbibing what you want. And therefore, a lot has to go into who you want your children to follow. And yes, as I said, and gurus like Buddha or all these ancient traditional teachers who have taught great things in times that were so much more adverse for this. Today, it has to again happen. And spiritual leaders, I think, have a great responsibility and possibility to bring that change apart from schools.
Thank you very much, Sonamla. 50 minutes is too short for such great minds. So I hope you'll carry on the conversation during the breaks. But before we end, I think we've been talking about bringing some heart education, traditional practices into the education system, and we should be facilitators ourselves, each one of them. So following the Bhutanese Buddhist tradition and Ladakhi Buddhist tradition, why don't we do 15 seconds contemplation to look at the state of our mind, because the Buddha taught that the power of intention and prayer is so strong. I should have done this at the beginning of the session to put that state of the mind in the positive state. And then at the end, we dedicate the merit that we produce from this session and all the good works we do to the benefit of all sentient beings. Sunam di tamje sikbani topne nyebe tanam pamje gega nachi balap tukbai sibi chole tonam dirwara sho. Thank you.